Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today, Amy, has some very valuable information to share with you. She wanted to jump right into the information, but she allowed me to actually take us on a journey through her life. So when we do get to that valuable information at the end, it has so much meaning and power because you've learned who Amy is and resonate with her and understand how the information she shares is going to be helpful for you. Let's get into the conversation now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
I know you guys will see this later, but it is really early on a Saturday, and we are here for you. So when I tell you the widowhood is intentional about showing up, this is what intentionality looks like. And Amy is here with us, and I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit, and then we'll go from there where she's at right now.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Balchune, and I am here this morning to kind of talk to you about my journey. I am a widow and became a widow at 40. And I'm trying to navigate this the best I can. And when I became a widow, I had a 2 and a 5-year-old, and it was the height of COVID. So there was a lot of things going on, a lot of uncertainty. And I was brought to Tina to kind of share my story and connect with other people.
Thank you. So we are going to back up a little bit because one of the things that I think we all find important is to realize and validate, although we may miss our spouse, we were a person before them, and we continue to be somebody in their absence or after they are no longer on this world. So I don't want to start the conversation right there. I want to know who Amy is. So where are you from originally?
So I am from Pennsylvania, a little town called Duryea. I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for 22 years. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my degree. As I said, I have 2 children.
Well, they're not born yet. We're still in
They
college.
weren't born yet. Okay.
Okay,
right.
no, okay.
Early on. Who is Amy?
Yeah. Okay, no. I'm gonna guide you. What gave you interest in being a teacher? Like when did you go, I want to be a teacher? Or did you start like with 2 or 3 other majors and then ended with being a teacher? How did that come about?
Yeah. So I totally wasn't called to being a teacher initially. Okay. So I'm this little girl living in Duryea, teeny tiny little town, and decided I wanted to make the leap to go to a city.
Okay.
So kind of went in really open-minded and initially had a psychology major. Then that led me to a little bit of anthropology. I've always been interested in cultures, understanding why people do specific things culturally. It still intrigues me to this day, which I think also is a bit of my mission as well, to understand how different cultures deal with grief, but we'll go there later. Right. So initially I was a psychology, and then that kind of led me to this idea of anthropologist moment. And so I was navigating college life, loving it. And then at 19, so I was in my second year, it was winter finals, and there was a knock at my door. And I opened the door, and my beautiful cousin, Colleen, was there. And she gave me the most devastating news I could have ever gotten, that my father died of a massive heart attack.
Okay.
So very early on in my journey, I experienced this. So there was literally a moment in which, I had a dad And then he was gone. And my dad was honestly one of my best friends. He would just come to Pittsburgh and hang out with me, like not even bring my mom and the family. And we would just like hang out and connect and chill. So very early on in my life, I had to understand this idea of death and grief. So I believe truly that altered my path.
For sure.
Because to be an anthropologist, it takes lots of years and lots of money and a ton more debt. So I believe that what happened was I went home, did what I had to do, and I went back to the University of Pittsburgh and finished out that spring semester. I did go back another year, but I was lost. And that was the year. So that was my junior year. But I knew that there were decisions that I needed to change and alter. Financially, I felt like I needed to get closer to my family. I was 5 hours away at that point. So ultimately I took that year to kind of really be confused, try to find myself to the best of my ability. And then I did move closer to home. So I left the University of Pittsburgh and went to Bloomsburg. Yeah. And then ultimately chose the path of becoming a teacher. So I was closer. I was an hour away from home instead of 5. My mom had, so I'm the oldest, and then my sister is 5 years younger. And then my brother was only about 9 or 10 when my dad died. So I was a little bit closer to help, but also to feel that comfort when I needed it. So I think ultimately that shaped my path and my career.
I would say so. Let's spend a little bit of time here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
At this point, you're 19. Mm-hmm. Can you share a memory of your dad?
Like a specific crystal clear one?
Whatever you want. If you remember, like, I always remember doing this with him, or I remember him doing this, or just an overall sense of who your dad was. But
sure. My dad ultimately really was my best friend. As I said, he would come out to visit me at Pittsburgh by himself. Like we would do family trips, but sometimes he would drive 5 hours to spend hours and then leave. I remember this one time he brought out one of my best friends. She lives in Switzerland currently. We lived together at the time, and we didn't have a Christmas tree. So he brought a Christmas tree up for us, just dropped it off and left. But I remember I did buy him, I scraped up some money. I would babysit and nanny.
Okay.
So I got some money together, and he loved the Rolling Stones. So I did buy tickets for he and I to go to that concert. That was a blast. I actually remember having conversations driving, just about, I remember them crystal clear, we would just have conversations about life choices. He owned his own business, so he had to make some decisions that were, very, very courageous in the beginning of his life. So I remember having, kind of him weaving lifelong lessons into our drives together. So he ultimately, the way I can describe him best was he truly was my best friend. And it's been 24 years now. But I can still call on him whenever I need him. Yeah.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Do you recall what it looked like as 19-year-old Amy looking at your mom being a widow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you see from that perspective?
My mom had to be very, very strong. She needed to navigate this with a lot of strength. I saw her always put herself last, always put us first. I saw her work 2 jobs, 3 jobs sometimes. So I would say she was a pillar of strength throughout this entire journey. My mom also never chose to move to another relationship. She always just felt like my dad, well, she still feels that my dad is and was the love of her life. And she wasn't interested in moving on. So to me, I saw in her eyes, I saw pain.
Mhm.
I saw suffering, but she never necessarily expressed that.
Wow.
It was like an unspoken
Known.
no.
Absolutely. Did your
Yeah,
mom, did she have other girlfriends, or did your mom have a social life outside of serving her family?
eventually.
Okay.
Um, she did eventually. Now she's got like the coolest group of friends. I mean, they're the coolest ladies ever. Um, she really does have a really good group
Yes, her
of women
network.
that surround
Mhm.
her. But initially, I think it was more family initially. I'm super lucky to have an incredibly tight family, an extended family. So
Okay.
I think it moved from that to eventually, kind of starting a little bit again by connecting with friends. But I think early on, she was just inundated with trying to financially support us, take care of
Mhm.
us, and work, to be quite honest. Yeah.
That is, it is called the real talk for a reason, for literally that. And I heard you mention something also that we talk about a lot in the widowhood, the financial impact when
Mhm.
someone passes. And it sounds as if you, whether on your own or being encouraged, needed to take a decision that was impacting the family financially to move from one college to another. There was financial impact, and there was also just proximity. Was that a decision you identified on your own, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it was on my own. I really think my mom, and it wasn't necessarily financially driven, that I don't think I financially moved locations. I didn't move locations due to financial
Okay,
issues.
but it was
Um,
okay.
I think I moved careers due to that, because when you look at
Mm,
an 8-year program as an anthropologist and
okay.
or a psychologist, um, and I thought about the fact that I needed to be financially stable myself in order to be less of a burden, if
Right.
that kind of makes sense. At least not have to deal with 2 kids instead of 3.
Right.
um, so I think that decision was made, and I adore teaching. It really, I think it was my true calling. But I believe that, yes, the proximity definitely was the guiding factor. My mom, I think, wanted me to stay in Pittsburgh ultimately, but I needed to be closer. I needed to feel loved, and I needed to know that in a moment's notice, in an hour, I could get home.
That means a lot. One
Mhm.
other question on this topic for now. You mentioned one moment I had a father, and
Mhm.
then one moment I did. And this is more looking back on your life, maybe not what you identified then, but what else was missing from your life when your dad passed?
Everything. Yeah. Um, I remember the feeling. Like, I remember the emotional feeling of, I fell to the ground. Um, and it just honestly felt like everything was gone. But to be quite honest with you, um, I didn't really show any of that.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So ultimately, I felt like everything kind of got taken away at once. My sense of safety, my sense of protection, my sense of financially being stable, my sense of navigating life, of having a partner to help me navigate life. Um, just that feeling of that identity of feeling safe and protected was just taken away. And with that, I think there's a lot of layers that feeds into.
Yes, and that certainly would lead into how you would navigate life and how sure or your footing would be as far as what you were 24 hours before that and what you are after that. And it is always so interesting how the absence of one person in this world can impact so many other people, and just realizing how valuable our lives are and how much important it is and how we show up in the people that are within the world we operate in.
Yeah. And honestly, when I say to you that although I felt all of that internally, I didn't show it. It took me 10 years to grieve my father because I didn't allow that to come out. I internalized it, kept it inside. And ultimately just to try to be strong, to try to be there for my siblings, to try to financially help, to try to help my mom, all that kind of stuff. I'm the oldest, so that comes with the territory sometimes. Right. And I think that initially, I know we'll get there, but I think initially I did the exact same thing when Jimmy died.
It is.
I internalized everything, but didn't show it. It was a pillar of strength. And ultimately found out that is a really terrible way to grieve in my path, on my path. I'm not judging others, but my path.
It's not even so much as judging other. It has proven that when you allow grief to mute you and you hold everything inside, it starts impacting your body physically. Understandably, everybody will identify what it is to let it out. It may not be a community. It may be in a journal. It may be going to the gym. I may be screaming in the house by yourself or in the car. But if we have the sense that this happened, I'm going to put this right over here, and I'm just going to come back to life and do something, that will crack. It will not last. Depending on the closeness of that relationship, it's not how we're hardwired as people. So how did you meet Jimmy?
We knew each other as childhood. We went to the same school, so we always knew each other. But I was about 27 when I met him. So I always knew him.
Knew of him.
Yeah. And we both were we both ended relationships about probably a year prior. So it was more of kind of just like we ran into each other socially, again, reconnected, and moved from there. So,
I'm drinking tea. I don't want to hear some. We met at 27 and moved from there. You see the pattern here. We did a little. Okay. So you met at 27. When was the next day? So I'm going to dig in. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we met, we reconnected, we were out socially and we met. And then he asked me to dinner. So we went out to dinner.
That same night or later?
Yeah. I think it was like maybe 2 days later.
Okay.
And then we reconnected and really just kind of fell in love quickly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Proposal, how long before that?
Yeah.
No, from that dinner to proposing. How long was that?
Yeah. It was about 2 years.
Okay.
That we were, we were kind of just finding, like I said, we had both been out of a relationship for a year. So just navigating newness, kind of navigating all of what a 27-year-old is doing, building a career.
Right. Exactly.
All that kind of stuff. And then, it was about 2 years later, we got engaged, got married. And
well, how did he propose? Once again, you're trying to speed us along. Come back. How did he propose? How did this happen?
Well, he proposed in front of all of my family and friends. So it was, shocking. Everyone knew but me. So I was surprised and shocked.
Okay. What were you told compared to what happened?
What was I told?
Mm-hmm.
We were just hanging out watching a game,
Okay.
and I didn't know. Everyone else knew. And then he popped the question, and then it was nice because everyone was there to celebrate with us. So yeah.
See, that is beautiful. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he proposes, and how soon from there to get to the nuptials?
About a year later, we got married.
Okay.
And I had Logan about a year after that. So my first son, we had about a year after we got married. And we didn't live together prior.
Okay.
We didn't live together prior. And then, so we moved. So that was we went on our honeymoon, moved in.
Ooh.
And then after that, about a year later, we had Logan. So that was the time. I think that was about the time. It's a bit hazy, but I think that's how it went.
No, that's fine. Okay. So now, at what point did you start becoming a school teacher? Right after graduating from Williamsburg, or?
I was 23 when I became a teacher. Yes.
And so how has teaching changed from then to now?
Really, in my personal opinion, the kids haven't changed at all.
Okay.
I teach fourth graders, so they're 9, 10. They're right at the cusp of finding independence, but still, want to, keep that innocence.
Right.
So it's like this beautiful. It's just this beautiful match of like wanting independence, but still not really wanting it. So I don't feel like the kids have changed at all. I still adore and love my job. But I do feel like the pandemic kind of altered a lot socially for our kids. I do. And a lot of use of technology. I think that it all of our kids have Chromebooks, and it kind of increased the amount of exposure they have to things. So I would say that's my biggest thought process. But to me, the heart of the kids is where it's at, and they haven't changed a bit. They're just still, that's why I do my job. I always tell them, thank goodness I have you, because you make me adore my job. You make me better people. So I really don't feel like the vibe of kids have changed, but I do feel like society has shifted a lot for teaching. So yeah,
I'm gonna shift you back to Logan being younger, Jimmy, and your second child. What does life look like for a while for you in that perspective?
I'm sorry, say that again. What does life look like?
What is your everyday life? Jimmy, the children, what does that look like until we start getting towards the time where Jimmy is no longer here? What does that in-between space look like?
So he was amazing because he actually ended up altering his entire career to support our family to the best of financial reasons. So what ended up happening was I would go to work all day, and then we would kind of cross paths. So I would come home, and so he would stay home with the kids, and then go to work. So I worked all day, and then he would stay home with them, and then he went to work really until about 12 o'clock, and then would crash. So he altered a lot of his life for us to have, a great financial stability for our family. Right. So a lot kind of got altered quickly once we had children, because, as when you do have children, you need to make choices and decisions based on them. So that's what really life looked like. It was it was a lot of sleeplessness, what we all went through, but it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work, so like I said, he would stay home with the kids, and then, so we didn't need the expense of daycare. And then
it is so expensive.
I would come home, it's a mortgage. So as soon as I would come home, he would go to work. So that's really what life looked like. So we always said we were kind of like two ships passing,
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, it was filled with love, joy, The kids, absolutely. And, that's kind of when we get to this topic, that's why it's just was so incredibly difficult on my children, especially my 2-year-old, because he was with them all day.
Right.
Yeah.
That relationship was very firmly established.
Yeah.
What I don't want to burden this part of the conversation with a lot of questions, but I would like for you, whatever you're comfortable with, sharing what led up to Jimmy's passing and then to go from there.
Absolutely. So it was tragic in nature. We actually, the night before he passed, my sister got married. So the night before, we were all in the wedding. My sister got married. We came home, and I actually needed to attend the next day. I had to go to a funeral. So I did that. He stayed home with the kids. And then he just really started to not feel well. So I came home, went downstairs. The kids and I were downstairs. And I remember it like as clear as day. We were putting together a puzzle. And he was just laying down because he didn't feel well. And something just came to me. Like something just came to me, over me. And I thought, and I also had this like beautiful, peaceful moment. Like I was exhausted. I just had my sister's wedding, needed to get up the next day, and be there for people that needed me, that were grieving. And then I had work the next day. So I was trying to manage all that with a 2 and 5-year-old. And there was this moment that came over me. And to be honest with you, the same thing happened when my dad passed, when I didn't even know he was dead. I remember right before my dad died, I remembered in Pittsburgh, I had this beautiful window. It was huge. And I remember looking out at the clouds and just thinking, this is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And it was like this peace that came over me. And it was finals week. So it was the Sunday of finals week. So my roommate that I love and adore, Maria, came in with a cup of coffee. She's like, are you ready to go? I was like, yep, let's get studying. But I remember this, like something came over me. And I had the same feeling when I had this sense of like, go check on him. Go check on Jimmy. And I had the same piece. I'm putting together a puzzle with my kids. But I remember this feeling. And I went upstairs and I just thought he was sleeping. And then I grabbed him and quickly realized that there was something very, very wrong. So I immediately realized that, he wasn't breathing. He was kind of lifeless. Unfortunately, my kids were there. So my mom was here. So I called to her and I said, Mom, I need help. So she came and got the kids, and I realized I needed to call 911 and begin to resuscitate. So we did that. And the ambulance came, and he ended up in ICU. And they were trying to figure out what was wrong. I remember clearly, and this is the height of COVID. So this is October of 2020. So I remember, I had to be alone in the emergency room because no one was allowed with me. Plus, my mom was with my kids. My sister was coming, but she wasn't allowed in. So she was outside just on the phone. By the way, she just got married the day before. So I remember just being like pulled from room to room to room because they were trying to test his heart, trying to just like figure out what was happening. So then we ended up in the ICU. And basically he wasn't responsive, but his heart was still beating. So what they tried to do was cool your body to a cooling temperature to try to regain any cellular activity in your brain. They tried to cool your body in order to save whatever they possibly could in order to jumpstart the body. So I had to leave. They made me leave because of COVID restrictions. I went the next morning and they didn't really have good news for me. So that kind of started the process of ultimately going through test after test after test until they declared him instead of having a cardiovascular death, he had something that's called a brain death. So his brain wasn't functioning. That was difficult to navigate because when I held him and I grabbed him initially, I knew that he was lifeless. I knew, and to be quite honest with you, I feel like that feeling I got down with my kids, I feel like that was his energy giving me the strength. So ultimately, I feel like I knew that, but I needed to be incredibly sensitive and understanding to other people coming to that same realization ultimately. The people that surrounded us, I'm still friends with his ICU nurse. I mean, they were an amazing group of people that helped us navigate this. So it was about a 2-day period until he was declared dead. Yeah.
The feeling, and thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can share that very briefly over a cup of coffee and we just move on. Sometimes it's like we are right back there, and having this conversation in parallel with the discussion with your dad is a different conversation than maybe you're accustomed to. So I don't take it lightly, your willingness to share and be so transparent and do that. In that first year of Jimmy's absence, do you remember much?
No.
Is that part right there, somebody that's highly functioning, doing all these different things, how did you deal with that struggle of operating in that grief fog, the wave, the prefrontal cortex operating and doing what it does versus what the amygdala? So now you go from this place where I know how to function to now I'm how does all that work for you?
You know, I honestly think that I say this was a blessing, but it was a very difficult blessing. But I feel that God gave me this blessing because during that time when everyone was trying to navigate this situation, and when I go to Jim, the ICU nurse who so incredibly beautifully not only took care of Jimmy, but unfortunately there was this energy of intense sadness and confusion that she navigated so beautifully. I said to her early on, I said, whoever you can put in my path to help me navigate this with my kids, please just send them. Like, if it's a counselor, if it's whomever you can just have me sit next to and begin talking this through, please just send them. They were amazing. They sent wonderful, amazing people my way that spoke to me with compassion, but also such truth and such honesty. And in a very interesting way, that gave me power in a powerless situation, which is a part of my passion, that of cosmic co-parenting. But
we're close to it.
I know, but all these connections here. So there was this power that I was given by the grace of God, these beautiful people that came my way that said, because I asked the questions, like, do I take them to the funeral? They're 2 and 5. What does that look like? Okay. So they said, well, developmentally, this is what it looks like for them. If you choose to do this, these are the things I suggest you do. If you choose not to do this, these are the consequences. Like, they weighed it all for me. They wrote it down for me to process. I asked, well, how do I tell my children their father is dead. They knew he was sick. They knew he was in the hospital. But at 2 and 5, they couldn't understand everything that was going on. So how do I go home and say this to them? I rehearsed it with them. They had me rehearse what I should say, how I should say it, the way I should navigate it, what I shouldn't cut out. That's so tough to deliver, but what is important to say. I was blessed with that. So I think to answer your question, initially, if I was in that moment where I grabbed him and he was lifeless, if I needed to deliver that information to my children then, I think it would have looked very different than having 2 days while, we were, doctors were doing what they needed to do. We needed to make sure we tried every single thing in order for the doctors to ultimately declare him dead, because he was still alive. So we needed to come together as a family, his mom, his dad, his brothers. We all needed to come together, hear the information, listen to it, and process it at our own time. And the pact that I made with them was that none of us were going to make that decision or have a doctor make that decision until we all felt comfortable with the knowledge. So because I knew they needed time to process that, it gave me time to process how I was going to go home and do this job. And as now that you know about that 19-year-old way of dealing with grief and the 10 years that I just was not getting it out, that was true Amy style. Okay,
you went right back to that.
Yeah, like, okay, this is not happening. I'm going to be strong. I am going to line up everything I need. I had my sister already calling psychologists for me. Like, I was like, I'm going to do this. This is fine. I got this. But learned very quickly I didn't.
How long were you able to hold that up?
I went to work a week after I buried him. I delivered his eulogy. Yeah, I mean, I put on the front real well. I'm going to say it was probably the summer. So I knew I had to work. He didn't have life insurance. Height of COVID, money was tight. I kept it and he did not. So it was a joint decision and a really bad decision. So I knew I needed to work. So I think I needed to keep that front. I feel like there were levels of things that needed to get broken down in order for me to feel. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I feel like so initially, I think that the time to process allowed me to help my children. Yes. I will not help them. No.
Well, but prepare how to deliver this life-altering information in such a way that you could maybe not damage them anymore because you didn't know the right way to do it. And there's a difference between getting in a car for the first time and driving a stick shift down the road and doing all that versus someone training you how to shift the gears and move the manual and do all that. It sounds like you wanted to be able to do this better than just get in the car and learn how to drive a stick shift as you go along. And you knew 19-year-old Amy what that looked like, but you didn't know 2 and 5-year-old Amy what that would look like and how to talk to these babies with such an adult conversation.
Yeah.
So that was wise to take the help. And you started community very early on in this grief journey and not doing it solo. That was wise.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I needed to phase out layers of that safety, right? Because that safety net gets pulled away, like when my dad passed, right? Like that's it. So I needed to make sure that I was able to work. So that was like phase one. It was like, Aim, you got to get yourself together. You need to work. Kids need insurance. You need money. So that was like front one. And then once I got that going, I was like, okay, phase two. My son never went, the district he was at never went to, they were fully virtual until March. Mm. So he was in kindergarten all day learning virtually. So thank goodness for my mother. who knew exactly what I was experiencing and going through. She stepped in and ultimately, I mean, I don't know how she did it, but a 5 and a 2-year-old. So Logan's learning virtually. Me as like a part of the class, like 2 years old, like doing the Pledge of Allegiance, you know? I think that was layer 2, was like Logan's educational experience, since he wasn't going on a bus and going to a brick and mortar school. So once that kind of got a flow, once I figured out I was able to financially keep it together, make sure Logan was able to learn, I think we kind of just got through every day. No one really could come over because it was the height of COVID. Holidays were always kind of a letdown because someone always got sick, or, you know, there was always an issue. So initially that first holiday into the next year, 2021, was a total blur. And I think, honestly, that's where I was living in, you know, financially keeping it together and making sure my kids were okay. I think summertime, you know, I was finally off of work and I had time to process. That's when I collapsed.
Okay.
I did do therapy. I did do therapy early on. I just have this way of like psychoanalyzing myself, which I think I learned from the initial 10-year period of not grieving. But I did do therapy early on. And then I kind of just didn't keep up with it, I think because of time purposes.
Okay.
And then COVID also altered all of that and what that looked like. So I ended up reaching out and realizing that life coaching was a little bit better fit for me.
Okay. I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm not going to let you scoot by this one.
No, go for it.
What did the breakdown in the summer look like? I don't want that word.
No,
I want.
No, that's okay. I'm okay with saying that.
And this is because the people that are listening that are in this widowhood, they're holding up this front, some of them. There may be somebody watching this conversation who literally lost their spouse this week, or maybe yesterday, that somebody has said, I know this conversation, I know this lady named Amy is sharing about her. I think this will help you to not to put on a charade. So what did breakdown look like for you? Because for everybody else, those words don't always mean the same.
Breakdown to me, well, my body was out of control because I come to find out that I have an autoimmune disorder, Hashimoto syndrome. So I always knew that I had thyroid issues, but never realized it was due to autoimmune purposes. I just thought my thyroid wasn't functioning properly. So my thyroid levels were crazy. Like I would get my testing done and it would be at like a level 9. And then the next round of testing, I'd be at a 0. Like my body was so incredibly stressed. So it looked like, you know, I would get this rash that would travel. My body, I didn't feel well. It was difficult to eat because I just felt so completely exhausted, and just didn't even enjoy eating, because I just was shutting down. Mentally, I couldn't focus, very scattered, really just coming to terms with the fact that I was just living to live and to take care of my kids. Really just making sure that I was there for my kids and I was able to financially provide for them. And that's it. There were no other joys.
Okay.
And I realized that I needed to do that. And I realized ultimately that my vision was clouded and I couldn't see my children's grief because I wasn't dealing with my own. There was no more room in my heart to accept their pain because my pain was so deep. There literally was no more room. So I struggled to see their grief clearly. And that has also become a passion of mine, to share my message, because in my opinion, until you grieve yourself, you can't reach the depths of your children's grief.
I would agree with that. What was the turning point to bring you into a different place after breaking down?
Mm-hmm. It got worse actually too.
Okay. Sometimes it has to get worse to get better.
My daughter, I noticed that she was not, my daughter at 2 missed her father with it was just so incredibly difficult for me to watch. I mean, she remembered everything about him, like Daddy's cup. This is the way Daddy, did this. She just crystal clear remembered everything about him and missed him so much. And I did a panel of blood work on her because she was just looking pale. Like there were just things she wasn't eating properly. She wasn't eating the way that she used to eat. So I ended up getting blood work done, and the lab called my doctor. We thought she had leukemia. Her levels were incredibly low. So now they admit her to Hershey Medical Center. And we're on the oncology unit.
And you're thinking, here comes round 3.
I am. Thank goodness it was just that she just had a lot going on in her body. She's anemic. We needed to do iron infusions, but they needed to make sure that anemia wasn't related to other things. And, now she's back and better than ever, but that was tough. So after all of that happened, I was about to lose my mind. So I was at that moment, and I was just like, I needed to find the depths of strength that I just didn't know existed. Like when I tell you I had to reach into places that I just, and surrender. I ultimately needed to surrender to God and say, please, I am done. I cannot take any more. I surrender. So at that moment, an angel came into my life. I literally was getting my hair done, and this woman was listening to my struggles, and she came over and she said, "You need my sister." And I said, "Okay, I need your sister." And she ended up texting me, my life coach, who kind of transformed a whole bunch for me. Once I was able to get in contact with her and start to build my foundation again, things started to finally not get easier, but I was able to find joy again, and I was able to begin to deal with all of the things that I needed to deal with. So, and it was really awesome too, because we found a way that on my drive home, I was able to speak with her weekly. So I needed to make it a priority, where before in therapy, I didn't make a priority to make it a priority, where this time around, I made it a priority to make sure that I was dealing with things. But honestly, I feel like the biggest gift she gave me was finding my foundation of who I was, because ultimately I did need to do this journey alone. I had a beautiful community to surround me, but at the end of the day, I needed to get well in order to serve myself, my children, and a community around me to the best of my ability. So I think that finding exactly the foundation of who I was, what makes me tick, defining that was the start. And then from there, I was able to really dive into the depths of grief.
Thank you for sharing that. What did it look like helping your children manage their grief? And probably that's a life process, but early on.
Yeah. Early on, like I said, I think I was clouded. So early on, there were tragic moments that I remember of, things that Logan would say that, we would just sit and cry together, and, I didn't really know what to say or how to say it, but ultimately there is no fixing it. So ultimately, I'm glad he would say things because I was his safe container. So I think initially, like I said, the 2 and 5 year old period until I started to get help, it was kind of just us coming together, them being open and honest, and like a lot of tears, hugs. And I think that's now morphed into a whole lifelong journey, as you said. I'm starting to realize that there are different developmental times in my kids' lives where they're able to understand something differently, and that opens up a whole new jar of questions, of uneasiness, of sadness. So I don't think that there's one way I can answer your question, but what I think it has done specifically is it allowed me, and I keep saying this, but it's the truth. I can see them where they're at in the depths of their sadness, and I can meet them there, and I can allow that into my heart, and we can talk about it and come up with a plan together as a team of how we'll navigate it. So it's a constant discussion. We talk about it all the time. We check in every night. We call it a blob tree, but it's just this. It's 18 different blobs on a tree with different emotions, and they're numbered. So we sit in. I don't care what time it is. At the end of every night, we sit in bed. It's in my bed together, and we check in. Okay, how are we feeling today? Are we missing daddy? Why are we missing daddy? How are we feeling? And my kids are super spiritual. So they feel like he is all around them. Okay. So there are different types of things, but to answer your question specifically, this is a life journey, and I'm learning that at different times developmentally, they need different things. Okay. And we have a team around them. So psychologists, my son experienced a lot of issues with food, too. So food therapy, there's tons of therapy happening. But yes, developmental milestones trigger different things, and they need to write their own narrative.
Thank you. You mentioned something about serving. You served your children. How is this morphed into serving in other ways?
Mm-hmm. Early on, right when I started life coaching, my life coaching journey, I honestly remember this moment. I was sitting at Starbucks in the morning, and my mom was watching the kids so that I could do this. And it was summertime, so I was off, and I was journaling before, and I feel like God came to me and said, "This is something you need to share with the world. Your experiences, your thought processes, rebuilding from the depths of nothing." My life coach always said, you could be heartbroken or get your heart cracked wide open. And I feel like my heart got cracked wide open. I know that's a good one, isn't it? And since my heart was wide open, I was able to fill it with listening to others, making connections. But ultimately, I feel like God told me this was a mission that he wanted me to do, and that I needed to try to set up some things that are lacking in our system for widows that lose someone at any moment of their life. Specifically, I started to research. I journaled a lot. And as I started to navigate this and think about that small population, I never realized that only 5% of the population loses their spouse at my age group. So since that's such a small population, I found that it was kind of difficult to find people like me that were dealing with things like me. And although being a widow, when you're a widow or a widower, I feel like there are similar connections that we all have. But I also feel like sometimes there's a little bit of, a lot of times those people die tragically. So there's this other level of a tragic loss. There's levels of having young children and having to navigate that. So as I was going through this process and realizing there was nothing out there.
Mm.
I felt like that's what God was calling me to do, to start to try to find ways to help people in this powerless situation find a little bit of power.
In your specific demographics.
Yeah.
And how is that going?
It's going well.
Do tell.
Yeah. So the term cosmic co-parenting just came to me,
Okay.
when I was journaling that, and it really it resonated with me, and I feel like it did because I call on Jimmy all the time to say, please take the wheel. Like, just I need your help on this one. Please just continue this. So there's this idea of, when you lose someone, I don't feel like they're completely gone, that there's an energy that continues. So
Okay.
when you're a parent, when you have this bond of being a parent, there's an energy that's created. I mean, you struggle as parents, you go through good times, you go through bad times, and that energy isn't gone.
Okay.
I felt like that didn't go away. So as I navigated this process, there were some things that I realized that I needed to do. And specifically in that 5% of the population, I feel like I need to promote this kind of idea and thoughts. So because I lost Jimmy in such a tragic way, and I was so young, a lot of times I think, I needed to, I harbored a little bit of like confusion of, why did you go? Like, why did you leave? And I needed to continue that conversation with him and become neutral with him, to kind of feel like, all right, I'm in a space in my life with him where we're good. Like I can continue this process with him, and we still have a relationship together, and we can continue to parent together. But I think until you get to that point where you feel a peace, a feeling of being neutral, like neutralized with them, you kind of can't get there. You're a bit clouded. So this idea kind of just came to finding resources, building resources for people in this situation. Like we just talked about developmentally, where are your kids at with grief? What do you do if your spouse dies? Like, what does it look like at the funeral? All of those things that those people gave to me because I had those 2 days, those are the types of things I really want to try to gather for people, unfortunately, in a situation like I am. I interviewed not thousands, but hundreds of ICU nurses, trauma care nurses, and doctors. And unfortunately, there's nothing out there. So I started this process by just interviewing, listening to medical professionals, and saying what can we offer people, and ultimately it comes down to nothing.
Oh.
There are no resources to give unless you can find someone and pull them from the oncology unit like they did for me.
Right.
But there's not a team to sit and support you. So my passion stems from trying to put something together, work with hospitals in order to give people in the same situation as I some resources to make the decisions that are best for them and their family.
So you've done the research, you have the concept. Where are you going from there?
So I am currently working. So there are different social media outlets I have, as well as a website that I'm building. But I'm also working with hospitals. I did team up with Jimmy's ICU nurse. So she and I work together. She was my first contact and call. And we go in and pitch our ideas to try to set up a team, a trauma care team, in order to support people in these situations. We're also on my website, I'm putting together resources for people to be able to use and navigate, and try to strengthen a process that is impossible, but unfortunately we will all deal with at one point in our life. I said this quote. This quote always, I always have it by me. This quote is something that I often think about, and it's by James Clear from Atomic Habits. And it says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. you fall to the level of your systems. And I go back to thinking, what system do we have for us?
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not know the answer to this. Have you given yourself a timeline or when the website would be available when people can start utilizing it? Or
It's up and running.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So it'll be in the link for the show
Yep.
notes to be able to get. How does it feel?
It feels really good, actually.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So
I have just a few more questions. Thank you for this conversation. What gives you joy now?
So much. I've got to be honest. I didn't realize how important it was to allow myself to grieve and to feel, and to love myself. Once I did that, so much opened up for me. My kids are flourishing. They give me incredible joy. I mean, they're honest, but they're doing a really, really great job of navigating this incredibly difficult situation. We have highs and lows, but we're open and we're talking. And I think that that's the most important thing. That gives me incredible joy. My career still gives me tons of joy. This newness, this new process that I'm starting in this new company that I'm beginning to navigate gives me joy because it's that creative side that I've been missing from my life. So that's giving me joy. And I also, one of the most important things is I did actually find the love of my life. Yeah.
You hear it here. Okay.
Yeah. So I am also in a new relationship for about a year and a half. And that is also giving me tons of joy.
Okay, that's a part 2 conversation. We can't even do that justice right now. So we're going to put a pin in that part. Okay.
And that takes a lot of courage as well. And to be honest with you, I told everyone, I said, I don't need anything else in my life. Like, I learned to love myself. I am good. I don't need another. I was not looking. And he literally fell right into my life, and I still wasn't accepting it. I was like, whatever, I am good. And then I was journaling, reflecting. After Christmas, I always take myself to dinner. I go to myself. I'm like, I did it again. Christmas happened, and I journal, and I journaled the things I needed to journal, and then I thought, I paused and I stopped, and I thought, do I want to give this a try? And I said, yeah, I do. And we connected, and honestly, he's the love of my life. And it's just very interesting how life has turned, but that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of courage. And that, like you said, that's a whole other set of
it takes a lot of work.
Steps to navigate.
It takes a lot of dealing with your own grief before you can show up in a new relationship. A new relationship doesn't solve the grief situation. Nope. And if you've not leaned into it, it will actually create another scenario. Another thing you said is grief cannot be fixed, because the only thing that would fix it is for the person we love to come back. Yep. That option doesn't exist. So learning how to manage our life outside of their existence in this physical world becomes the work that people are afraid to do, because it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt because it's going to hurt.
Yep.
If you could pick any time in your life and speak to Amy, when would it be and what would you tell her?
To go back and teach her a lesson, or to give her advice, or just to celebrate?
Whatever you wanted it to be.
If I could have gone back to Amy at 19 and 20, I would have told Amy, you need to deal with your grief. and you need to love yourself, and you need to find your foundation. When I felt like all of that safety was taken away from me, instead of just putting on the front, I should have patched the foundation and built Amy. And I should have dealt with my grief. Now, I would, celebrate for doing that and for getting to the heart of who I am as a person, and for dealing with the incredible sadness that came my way. So
thank you. What is the name of your website?
So it's cosmiccoparenting.com.
Okay.
And social media as well. So that's linked to there too, on my website, but also you can go to Cosmic Co-Parenting and social media, and you will get there as well.
Okay. I have been able to ask you a lot of questions and allow you to share your journey. I'm going to flip it a little bit and see if you have any questions of me. Let you be the podcaster for a moment or so. Host.
What is the greatest, I don't want to call it advice, because oftentimes people like to give advice and we don't need it, but what was what is the best piece of information that you received from doing this that was most impactful in your life or your journey?
And when you say doing this, I believe you're referring to Widowhood Real Talk.
Well, or your grief journey.
What was the most impactful bit of information I received is when a friend gave me this book. I wasn't ready to say goodbye because I wasn't. That was not my plan. We were on a weekend getaway, but this was the start of me reading, researching, understanding, digging into my own self, how to show up for my children. This was the beginning of going, there's books and information out here. I had the what to expect when you're expecting. I had the, okay, we're about to get married. It was like, he is dead and I'm still alive. I understand a funeral, but everything after that, this was the beginning of me starting to change what was on my bookshelf and what became the things that I needed to start leaning into. That was the beginning of that. And it led to me early on leaning into my grief very quickly and being intentional about that, because I didn't want to be stuck in my life only thinking about the moment Mark died. I never want to forget him. I too have found someone else. I actually remarried, but I still have Mark's last name. And I found a gentleman, and we talked about that. He said, your children would not have a parent with the same last name on this earth. Why would I want you to change that? And I knew in just so many things that he understood what was important and still does to me now. So this book right here was the beginning of me going into the situation with my eyes wide open and not digging my head into the sand that he is no longer here. Every day I need to be about the business of living. And that was helpful for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. And one of the things I took away as well when I was looking, you oftentimes give that to widows, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. It kind of goes back to that whole moment of finding power in a powerless situation, doesn't it?
It does. And a lot of times people are not ready to sit in a therapist's office. A lot of times the grief is so raw and edgy, and you're not ready to tell someone that you feel unbalanced and disheveled and the world is scattered because no one's saying that on a regular basis out loud. But if you can read that in the privacy of your home, and then there's an accompanied journal to go with that and start flushing out your details instead of holding it in, it starts preparing you to start determining what life will look like if you choose to navigate it. As we spoke about earlier, everyone chooses to do this differently. Some people are in a place where their loved one died yesterday in their mind, but it's 30 years later and they're still in that space where the idea of leaning into the grief is painful. But the part about that, if you have broken an arm or a major joint and you never had it taken care of and it mends in place, and then later you go see someone, they may have to re-break it to make it a clean scenario and put it back in place. And so now, because we may have chosen to stay in that moment of where it happened, that when we do try to move forward, it can seem excruciatingly painful because now it has to be broken and reset again. But there is good on the other side because you're still alive. So that means there's purpose and there's a reason why you're here. And finding that and still being able to celebrate this person you love, that duality can exist. I can love Fred and enjoy every moment and yet have this foundation, Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, showing up and honoring Mark and being there for other people and having that space. Our capacity to love as human beings can expand as wide as we will allow it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Any other questions?
How soon after that tragedy did you realize that this was something that God was calling you to do? So I guess my question is, how long after your husband's passing did you begin this process of realizing that you needed to do something with all this information?
2022, Mark died in 2017.
Okay.
This wasn't like, oh, he died, I'm going to make purpose out of this. No, that is not. But I want people to know that because we are now, as we're recording this, it's March 2nd. We are a few days away from the day that Mark died. And it does not impact me how it did, but it sure does still impact me. When March comes, I'm going, wow. I start thinking about different things that happened and where I am mentally compared to that day when I was at the end of the hallway losing my mind and the medics were working on him. That woman did not foresee this was possible.
No, I can agree. Yeah.
It was survival. It was how do we make it through the next 24 hours and do that. But when this did become an entity and God making it clear, it was the right timing for me. Somebody may go through their entire grief journey and never feel like I haven't gotten purpose out of it. Every time you have a conversation with someone who is grieving and you show up and know how to sit there with them like nobody else does, you are having purpose. Everybody's way of showing up in the world is different. And if you get up every day, you are honoring the person you love and you are making purpose.
Yeah.
I thank you for this conversation because being vulnerable is not on your checklist of things that you wake up wanting to do. And be transparent. And I know you probably wanted to just, let's get to the good part about, the cosmic parenting. It's like, no, darling, we're gonna come and you allow me to do that. Thank you for not saying no, we're not doing any of that. We just get into so thank you for being
absolutely.
so kind to share.
Thank you for getting me there because there was such a connection between 19-year-old Amy and 40-year-old Amy. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I will allow you to close out this conversation.
All right. Well, I truly appreciate our time together today. It's always interesting how, as I reflect on things, I learned things about myself today that I didn't know because of our conversation and our journey. So just proves that continuously talking, reflecting, and thinking about these things is so incredibly important. So I just want to say thank you for giving me this time. This process is cathartic in itself. And I truly appreciate you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Widowhood, thank you for being here with us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.